Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of 50 Conversations with 50 Strangers. Today, I have the honor of getting to know somebody along with you as I have every day for the last probably week and a half with 45 other people. We've had a short conversation, to be transparent. We've had a short conversation in the green room before we got on. And I was telling Ruth that I didn't know anything about her, and she was mentioning to me, and she'll mention it. I asked her to mention it here, that before she signed up, she did a little research, and so she listened to a couple shows. So she had an idea of what went on, but I know nothing about her. But what I do know is that something happens in this room that can be magical. And even though my mommy told me never talk to strangers, and even though I love my mommy so much that I respected that, as I've grown older, maybe I've realized there are no strangers. Maybe I've realized that we are all so connected. We are all so much a part of each other that if we would just give each other the space to share with each other, we would see that. And it was in writing my book, The Mosaic, where Mo, which was mainly me, don't tell anybody, Mo, which was me, lost his parents 2 years apart on the same day. And when he asked the adults where his parents were, they told him that they were in a place called heaven. So the little boy went out in search of the place called heaven. And the people he met were not the people you would imagine. They weren't the ministers and the priests and the rabbis and the swamis and the gurus and the Shinto priests and the Aborigines elders. They were the street worker and the garbage man. They were the blind woman and the homeless man. They were the waitress and the juice man. And he wondered, why am I meeting these people? Like, these don't seem like the people I would bump into that would teach me about heaven. But when he sat with them and spoke with them, what he realized is every single one of them, once he knew them, was entirely different than the person he thought he was walking up to see. And in that perceptual shift of seeing a world that he had never seen before is where he realized only years and years later, he being me now, was my place called heaven. It was in that shift of seeing the world not like I see it, but the world as it is, that something mystical happened. And I think it's why I'm having these conversations, because when I finished the book, my book spoke to me and said, go out into the world and have conversations with people, go on street corners and business offices, in schools and hospitals and prisons and homeless shelters and government agencies and in boardrooms, and just sit and talk to people and see what they have to say. And the week before I was going to leave, COVID came and said, you're not going anywhere. So now I'm having these conversations with people virtually, and the conversations have been absolutely beautiful. So without much more ado, because I'm already talking way too much, I want to introduce Ruth Davenport to this conversation. Ruth, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking your time to share a conversation with an imperfect stranger like myself. And welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be a part of it.
It's my honor. Because I have no idea who you are, and people maybe listening have no idea who you are. Maybe they know who you are. Maybe, sometimes I talk to people that are the world renowned. I don't have any idea who they are. Will you tell us who you are and what's important to you?
Sure. Sure. So currently, I'm a stay-at-home mother of 3 kids. I have a 5, 3, and a 2-year-old.
Wow.
So the only reason why I have the next 45 minutes off is because Daddy's home watching the kids right now. But it's really funny because so growing up, I was always very driven. It was just something that was inside of me from a very young age, that I was very ambitious, extremely determined and goal oriented. And I knew I wanted to become a CEO. I wanted to get into finance. I wanted to climb that corporate ladder as fast as I could. And I pushed myself very hard in everything I did. I always pushed very hard. And so I put myself through school. I got my finance degree, moved on to get into financial advisor. And so I had told myself, in my goals, marriage is not in my goals. Kids are not in my goals. And I was very determined to stick with that. So when I met my husband now, Sam, when we met, I actually was like, you are not part of my plan. This is not where I'm trying to go in my life. And we separated for a while because I told
Wow.
myself, wait, I'm having emotions that I'm not comfortable with, and that's going to derail me from my path. So I just have to remove this out of my life. And I just assumed, oh, he's going to go away. I'm never going to hear from him again. And that wasn't the case at all. He actually stayed in contact with me, kept a friendship with me, which was really shocking because he did the exact opposite of what I was expecting. And, I was in my close to mid 30s by the time that he came around. And so by then, all of my friends were already married. They already had kids. And they kept encouraging me, Ruth, you have to give this guy a chance. He's such a good guy. And they kept pushing and pushing. And so I said, okay, maybe y'all are right. Maybe I'm being too hard, and maybe I need to open my heart up a little bit. And I've done so much, because by that point I had already bought my first home. So
Wow.
I was already a homeowner, and just thinking, this is my first investment property, and I was just on my way.
Right.
So from the time that I opened my heart to the time that we got engaged was a span of only 6 months,
Wow.
maybe not even that.
Wow.
And then a year later, we were married. 2 years after we were married, is whenever I found out that we were going to be having Adeline.
Wow.
And my reaction, because I still at that point was still thinking, okay, I allowed marriage into the equation, but that's all I'm willing to allow. I'm not
Right.
willing to allow anything else. So it took me a solid 6 months from the time that I found out I was pregnant to the time that I could accept it and not be fearful. And I had so many emotions of, this was not part of the plan. Like, what's happening? Everything. I felt like I'm losing all control, because
Yeah.
obviously I'm very controlling. And, but it's funny, because what I've learned throughout this is that sometimes your best laid plans that you have for your life may not actually be what's best for your life. And there may be this whole alternate life that God had intended for you, that he just will find a way to move you there, even if you're super determined and stubborn like me and are saying, I'm not gonna do that. He found a way. And so now we've been married for 7 years, and we have 3 beautiful children. And I think what I've learned throughout this whole experience is that um, where you need to be, God will find a way to put you there,
Wow.
even if you don't think that's where you belong. And so all of the skills and the lessons and life experiences, I'm now able to pour out into teaching my children. And I'm able to see in the way that they interact with each other, I'm able to teach valuable lessons like, if you see someone who's hurt, don't be silent. Do something, speak up, say something, get help. I'm also to, teach valuable things that are going to be super important as they grow up later in life, which we're really seeing right now in our culture. Everything that's happening globally, that's happening, where people are starting to realize we need to speak up against things whenever we see injustice, or whenever we see um, people being oppressed, that we can't be silent anymore. We have to do something about it.
Yeah. There are so many things I would want to unpack in what you just said, which is so beautiful. The Jews have a saying, they say, man plans and God laughs. And I know in my life, I think she's laughed quite a bit.
Mhm.
But it is just beautiful to watch how even when we dig our heels into the sand, we are pulled to where our place is to go. And I
Right.
think if people would only open up to the possibilities, so many times I talk to people and they say, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what I'm doing here. And if they would just like let go a little bit of all the mental constraints and just let themselves be taken to the place where it is their place to be,
Yes.
they wouldn't have to hold their heels in the sand or do all that. The other thing that I I really liked in what you said is I don't know where, and I'm sort of lobbing this over to you to see if you know
Mhm.
where it became more important for us to change the world than to impact our kids and our family. And when I grew up in a pretty nuclear family. This was like before dinosaurs, where you can see I'm an old man. But we grew up in a time where mom was always home to make milk, and she made milk and cookies for us when we came home from school. We sat around the dining room table and laughed, and mom always made. I always kidded her, if it was Wednesday, it was meatloaf. If it was Friday, it was salmon cakes. We knew exactly what the schedule was. We knew, but there was something beautiful in the regularity of knowing that every 14 days we were going to have the same meal or
Mhm.
whatever it was. And and we sat around the table, and we weren't wealthy. We grew up in a lower middle class family, but what we lacked in money, we were filled with in love, and we felt loved and taken care of. We In the evenings after dinner, television wasn't even as big as it is now, so my dad would put on Nat King Cole on the radio, and he would sing with Nat King Cole, and my mom would swoon around him, and we would just cover our eyes like, oh no, here she goes again, right? But those memories were so intact of just the life of a family lived together. And so my sadness was they just left too soon. They left when my dad passed away when I was 13, my mom when I was 15. But the impact that they had on my life was so big. And maybe it's because they left before teenage years where the bad impact could have happened, but I don't think so. So there's something so beautiful to just taking care of those closest to us, and
Yeah.
building in them something that will take care of the world that they interact with, and then they take care of the world they interact with. What do you
Right.
think about that?
Oh, I 100% agree with you. That's exactly the reason why I chose not to return back to work, and I'm going to stay home because I think lots of times, pre-coronavirus, I think our society was very driven by, I want to keep up with the Joneses. I want to have, the 2, 3 car garage. I want to have this or that. The I want to haves, I want to haves, I
I
want
want
to
to have,
haves.
yeah,
And we were so focused on trying to obtain that, that we forgot to take care and nurture what we already do have. And so it was very important to me. It was an intentional decision that I'm going to stay home because this moment that I have with my children, it's so short
yeah,
in the grand scheme of life. This, 5, 6, 8 years that I have while they're before they start school, it's such a short period of time that, it's important for me to invest into them the values that I want them to learn, that they're probably not going to get if they were in a daycare or if
yeah.
they were in-home care or something else. And so I said, yes, absolutely, this is the most important thing for me right now. So it may mean that we sacrifice our lifestyle a little bit, but again, I felt that's a very short-term sacrifice for a great gain that we are going to get down the road. And it was absolutely worth it, and didn't even have to have a second thought in that decision.
I love that. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking about some of the people who might be listening, and they may be women that are in that are about to encounter a similar situation.
Mhm.
Um, and there's, we're just, with all that's going on in the world, it's hard to remember even just a few years ago, a couple of years ago, the Me Too movement was big, right? And
Mhm.
how we deal with women and where women's place is. And it wasn't only just about respect, it was about how does this culture treat its women?
Yes.
And for those women who feel like they have sacrificed for their families and lost their capacity to be who they wanted to be,
Mhm.
what might you say to them now?
So, what I would say is, I think where we went wrong in the beginning is I think we set women up for failure by trying to tell them you can have it all. The truth is, you cannot have it all. It's not possible to have your family where you want it to be, have your career where you want it to be, have your social life. You just cannot hold all those plates up in the air and keep them from falling down. So by putting that into our heads, we've been taught that now for a few decades, like, oh, you can have it all, female empowerment. And so we were trying to achieve this idea that is not realistic. So then we constantly felt like we're failing, or we would feel guilty because we may be working moms, but our home is falling apart, or we're stay-at-home moms, but we feel like, oh, there's so much more I could be doing out there if I were to have a job right now or be back in my career. And so I think what we really needed to teach women is it's okay if you don't necessarily have it all. Choose the things that are important to you at this time. Because the truth is, when you're a mother, from when your child is born to when they go off to college, your life changes in the stages as they're growing up. Right now, my phase, my children are very young, so I'm very involved in their lives. They're very dependent on me. They require a lot of my time. Let's fast forward 10 years from now. It's going to be a totally different phase in life. And
Yeah,
the things that I'm going to be able to do 10 years from now is completely different from what I'm able to do now. So I think what women need to learn is appreciate the phase where you are in life with your children now. Decide, what are my top priorities? What do I want to invest my time, my skills, and my passion into right now? And recognize this is just temporary, because it's going to change. Your kids are going to grow, they're going to get older, they're going to become more independent, and recognize that in a few more years, what you can be doing is totally different. So
yeah,
don't get stuck in thinking, oh, this is it. This is just my life. Because it's not. It's your life for the moment. But something one of our Sunday school teachers taught us is that the days are long, but the years are short.
wow,
And that is so true,
I
because
love that.
you'll go back and you'll look at photos and you're like, wow, I can't believe how small, can't believe how small you were. Look at how tiny you were, and look at how big you are now. And it just seems like the years flew by.
Yeah,
So I think it's important to just, be conscious of what's really important to me right now. Because something that actually I recently started within this past week is, I started a mentorship program for girls for ages 16 to 24, because I'm at a point in my life now where I can give back more. I can do more because my kids are a little bit older than where they were 3 years ago. And so I'm doing it simply just because I want to encourage girls. I want to help build confidence in them. I want to teach them, how do you network in this virtual world? And it was something that was important to me. So even my life today, it's different from
yeah,
just 3 years ago, and I'm able to do more. I'm able to give more. And so I think it's just important recognizing those things.
yeah. It's really interesting because I love what you're saying, because it gave a different perspective to a character in my book, The Mosaic. One of the characters is a road worker. And the story says that no matter how beautiful a road, no matter how windy or straight, no matter how run down or old, every road eventually will get a pothole.
Mm-hmm.
And the road worker, his job is to repair potholes. And it's
Mhm.
not anything hard. It's not anything big. It's not, that's what he does. He's paid to come in and chip away at it, make it clear, pour concrete in, repaint it, and pretty soon it's as good as new, as if there's no pothole there. But what he watches is how people relate to the potholes that are in their life. And I
Mhm.
always thought potholes were troubled areas until I just heard you speak, because there's another dimension to those potholes, which are now, and I thank you for this, which is now those beautiful segments of our life that we're in right now that we think may be the way we have to live our life forever, but they're really only moments of time.
Right.
They're days that are long and years that are short, which I love. I remember holding my daughter when she was first born and having her head in my hand and her feet not touching my elbow. And now she's 30 years old.
Mhm.
And but I still remember holding her and carrying her around like that, and so time passes quickly. Those potholes that we think will be in forever really don't last, because eventually the road worker will come and he has to get you out of those potholes because he has to
Right.
fix the pothole, right? So
Mhm.
it's sort of another beautiful way, and I appreciate you giving me another perspective of what that character means. What makes you happy?
Happiness, it's something different every day. So sometimes it can be something as simple as I just see a little butterfly fluttering by and I just think that's such a beautiful thing. And other times it can be whenever I see the way that my children interact with one another. I see them sharing concern. If someone got hurt and they go over to see, are you okay? Um, or sometimes it can be a meal and I'm like, this meal tastes good, I did good today. Because not every day is a good meal. Sometimes you're just throwing stuff in the microwave or you know bacon in the oven and you're like, oh, I hope that turns out right. um, but I think also it could just be a good conversation because,
Yeah,
at sometimes I don't always get to have adult conversations
yeah.
every day with people. And, or it could be finding a good flavor of wine that I liked. And I'm like, oh, that was good. That's a happy feeling. um, so
Talk.
yeah, it's a lot of different things.
I love that. Talk to me about. You spoke about being a person that likes to control.
Yes.
Talk to me about control and surrender, if you can.
Sure. So the control, I definitely that was inherited from my mother because my mother is very controlling and she still is to this day. And I think I have to I'm grateful from the lessons that I've learned just by observation. So I learned that, okay, yes, I inherited that, but I don't have to allow it to control me completely. And so it took several years to unpack, to surrender more, to realize that you get more whenever you open up. Like you're able to do more, you're able to accomplish more, you're able to feel more whenever you stop trying to be so in control of every part of your life. And it's definitely not something that happens overnight. It's something that takes time. It's something that you have to be intentional about to say, okay, I'm not going to try to control this aspect. Like I'm just going to allow what happens to happen. And it takes time. It takes time to do that.
So there were two different statements you made there, and both of them interest me. And one of them, I think, is one of them I would think, and I'm lobbing this over for you to tell me what you think. One of them I feel would be more productive than the other. One of them is I'm not going to control this. The other one is I'm just going to let what happens happen.
Mm-hmm.
It feels to me in the lessons that I've learned in life, when I say I'm not going to do something, the universe doesn't hear the not. It just hears the thing. I'm going to do something. And when I say I'm going to just surrender this, that it's much easier to surrender. Do you find that to be true, or do you find that there any distinction in the way you express something helps you to have it?
Yeah, I do think that whenever you say, okay, I'm going to open myself up this time, because if you're already a controlling person, it seems like it's just something that you have to work on a continual basis. It's not something that, oh, I dealt with that 5 years ago. Now I don't have to ever worry about it again.
Stop.
With yeah, with controlling people, we have to constantly be in a place of working on ourselves. But I absolutely do feel that whenever you open up to saying, okay, however this is going to happen, I'm going to learn to take the positives out of it. I think that's also a key part, is learning to look more in a positive light, in a positive perspective at things, than to always go and be looking for, oh, well, but this didn't happen the way I wanted it to, and that didn't happen. And if you go with that lens throughout life, you're going to have a very miserable life.
Yeah, totally, totally. I want to share a story, but I don't have. We don't have time, and I want it to be your time. So I'll share it some other time with you. I promise.
Okay.
Um, let's go to the lightning round. Just fast
Okay.
questions. You can answer fast or slow. You can. It's totally yours to do
Okay.
how you want. Are you a dog person or a cat person?
Dog.
Dog. And how about coffee or tea?
Tea.
Tea. Well,
Yeah, I actually don't like coffee.
okay. I was trying to figure out if it would work that coffee people like dogs and tea people like cats, but I think it's blown out of the proportion.
It's not.
There's no correlation to it at all. Uh, would you say you're a person that's in the box or out of the box?
Um, I would say that I can be a little of both, but then I think I have that other lens where I can step out of the box and say, well, let's look at some other alternatives too. Maybe there's something out there that we should consider.
So where would you say you live most of the time? In the box or out of the box?
I would say most of the time I'm in the box,
Wow.
and I push to get out.
And why? Why? And answer or don't answer. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but for having the perspective to be able to get out of the box and say, why don't we try it like this?
Mhm.
And then choosing to live in the box and pushing to get out of the box. Why? Like, why would you be in somewhere where you're pushing to get out of when you know that you can be out of it whenever you want?
I think it's something that you said at the very beginning, when you were talking about how you learned yourself that by speaking with other people and broadening your horizons and learning from others, that we're actually more connected than we are apart.
Yes.
And so I think, we're brought up to believe a certain way, look at things a certain way, and then you get older, you meet other people, you hear about different cultures, different perspectives, and then you start to like look introspectively and see, wait, maybe everything that I was taught isn't necessarily right. Maybe I need to open up more
Yes.
and see that there's a whole nother world. And actually, we kind of all are thinking the same. We may have a different set of beliefs, but we all want the same things. We all want to feel loved. We all want to be able to provide for our families. We all want to take care of our children. So even though we may look differently, we may worship differently, we may, even our meals may look different. We still ultimately want the same things in life.
What I love is you could be a spokesperson for the mosaic, and we just met each other. I mean, but I love that. Thank you. What a beautiful statement.
Thank you.
And I really want listeners to just listen to what Ruth just said, because that one statement. I mean, she said a lot of beautiful things, but that one statement. If more of us would believe that and see that and feel that, I don't think we would be living in the world we're living in right now.
Yes.
Okay. Um, both of these are important.
Okay.
But what I'm going to ask you for is, in this time frame for you, which do you feel is more important?
Okay.
Do you feel it's more important for you to have a platform where you can speak your message and be heard? Or do you feel it's more important for you to create a platform where you can listen to other people speak what they need to say and listen to them so that they feel heard?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I'm not sure if I could choose one over the other. Um, and it kind of ties into what I was saying previously, because if all we're doing is speaking our message out, but we're not receiving from others, then there's a disconnect because it has to be a two-way conversation. It's important for you to get your message out, yes, and for us to hear it. But then at the same time, it's important to listen to others because of the fact um, this group may have other issues as opposed to what I may be dealing with. And we need to collectively hear one another so that we can find out, okay, how can I be helpful to you? Perhaps you can also be helpful to me. But the only way that we're going to be able to learn that is if we're also listening to one another. So I think both are equally important, where you need to have that element of being able to get your message out, but you also need to be willing to open up and say, okay, I would like to receive from you as well.
So I want you to see that in a person who thinks they're in the box, pushing to be out of the box, the way you answered that was so out of the box. It's so beautifully out of the box. And very few people answer that way. They normally follow my instructions, and my instructions are purposely created to see if someone will not follow my instructions. And just because of the way I answer that question is, I always thought it was important for me to speak my message. Now what's happening is, the more I listen to people, the more my message is becoming clear. My message is to speak and say what the people that nobody listens to are saying, and to share that message with the world. And the only way that happens is when I listen to what people are saying and be able
Right,
to share that platform, which is what this whole show is about: 50 conversations with 50 strangers, to give people the chance. And then that becomes my voice. People start to say, well, what are you doing with 50 conversations? Well, I'm not doing anything. I'm listening. I'm giving a platform,
right.
right? But it becomes my platform, right? So I love the way you answered it. And I want to just encourage you to see yourself out of the box if I can. That's just my love to you, because the way you think is bigger than the box you are put in. And I think that's a beautiful place to be.
Thank you.
Um, Being that we're having that conversation, do you feel like you fit into the world, or have you always felt a little different?
I would say in the beginning, I mean, it, like I said earlier, it started very early in life. I realized that I was a little different because, I mean, as early as 5 years
Wow.
old, I could tell that maybe I was just a little bit more mature than my age group around me, than my peers. And it did take me a while to feel like it's okay to be different, and that the uniqueness that we have, it's a good thing. It's good that we all have our different skills, characteristics, personality traits, because it's like we're all little pieces of this huge, vast puzzle. But when we all collectively work together, we make this beautiful mosaic, if you would like to call it. And so it's important to not feel that I'm not important, for those people who feel like you said before that there are people, you hear people who say, I don't know what my purpose is. I would say to that, don't feel like your purpose is a singular thing. It doesn't have to be just one thing and then that's it. Your purpose can be ever evolving. It could be somebody at work who you just feel like, I really need to encourage this person, or it could be a family member. It could be so many different things, but your purpose doesn't have to be one thing. It could be something different as you grow and develop as well.
Yeah, I love that. My I believe my wife's purpose is just to love.
Mm,
And sometimes when she tries to put that into a business format, she doesn't know what to do with it.
mm,
But our purpose doesn't mean that we have to make money from it. Our purpose just
right.
means that's why we're here on this earth.
Yes.
And so I love again, I love what you're saying. And in the research that I'm doing, because I'm getting data from these conversations that I'm having, I've been often surprised to see how what a large percent of the people I speak to, and it may be that the people that are coming for these conversations are just a certain type of person. And
Mm,
I want to try and find how I can get into bigger arenas where they're not people that are that way to see if it's still true.
mm-hmm,
But I'm going to say about 95% of the people answer this question that they feel different than everybody else.
mm,
And I wonder why different people who feel different feel such a need to make other people fit in to a world that they feel different from.
mm.
Any ideas?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I know the answer to that one.
Okay. All right. Well, if you do, let me know. Okay. One time,
Okay.
just email me. Figure it'll hit you. Go, oh my God, that's right. Um, would you say you operate from your head more or from your heart more?
I I think I operate from my heart first. I think that's where it comes from first. And then my head tends to kind of try to say, well, let's see about that. But then, and it is a fight between heart and head. Sometimes heart wins, sometimes head wins. I think ultimately I also just pray about it, and then whatever I feel is right in my spirit is the way that direction I take.
So I love even in that question, you're bringing a third element in because sometimes it's we have an option to not operate only from our head or our heart, but we have an option to operate from spirit.
Yes.
And spirit will integrate the head and heart
Yes.
in a way that head and heart might fight. Spirit
Right.
just says, for me, spirit is the mosaic which combines all those pieces together and comes to what is the place where spirit can operate as a whole
Yes.
function. So I love again the out of the boxness of your reply. Um, would you say you're a leader or a follower?
Definitely a leader. That's something that was in me from also a very early age. It was a role I felt very comfortable in, and I continue to feel comfortable in that role. It's something that I'm trying to teach my kids. I especially with my oldest daughter, I am constantly teaching her, you're the leader of your siblings. What you do, they're going to follow you. So it's important that you make the right decisions because people are always watching you. So even now, I'm trying to teach leadership and the importance of doing the right things because people watch leaders closely.
I love that. So with that, you couldn't have put a better lob over the net for me to ask the follow-up question today.
Okay.
Okay. In the world we live in, there are so many areas where we could have this conversation. We could have it we could have it in medicine. We could have it in education. We could have it in male female relationships. We could have it in a number of places, but perhaps um, the easiest place to see this conversation is in the political realm that we live in right now.
Mhm.
And I'm not asking you what side of the fence you agree with or don't agree with because it really doesn't matter to me.
Mhm.
But when I look at the pro-Trumpers
Mhm.
and I see the loyalty they have to Trump, sometimes it seems to block the ability to see things that are not happening well. And in
Mhm.
my mind, a leader has the ability to stand within the silo of their own belief system and
Mhm.
say, this is great, but this isn't great. And we can't continue to do this. We have to go against the way the silo is because we have to bring the silo to a place that is more connected, more unified, more whatever.
Right.
Now go into the Trump bashers, the anti-Trump people. Okay, so they call them the Democrats, okay, or whatever they call them. Um, the Democrats do the same. They do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's an inability to look at what this man has done and see anything good. And so if and he's done some good things,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody gives him credit for doing anything good, and they stand united in that. So
Mm-hmm.
we have two silos of people who don't have the ability to leave their silo, and they lead with only, they really aren't leading, they're following the silo.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it's caused a dearth of leadership in ourselves. Do you have feelings on that?
Yeah, no, I think that was a really good description. It makes me think about a speech that I was watching, and this was back in 2016. It was before the election, and at the time, it was President Obama was giving a speech at Florida State University, and he was talking about how um, nothing he couldn't get anything through Congress. And he said one time he took one of their legislations, took it verbatim, but he put his name at the bottom,
Mm,
and then he sent it through Congress and they rejected it. So
wow.
he said even when it was their own plan verbatim, they still rejected it because it had my name on it.
Wow.
And I absolutely think that you're right, because there has been some criminal justice reform that has been done that hasn't been done in decades, that the Trump administration should get credit for that. And but then there's also, so you've got criminal justice reform, which is a major positive, and then you've also got what's happening with ICE and how they're separating families at the border, and children haven't seen their parents in months. So you've got these definitely polar opposites, um, and it has driven our nation into it's like a team Trump, or team not Trump.
Yeah.
It's like the you pick a side. But I do think that our country desperately, desperately needs to find a way to find more of the things that connect us than separate us, for the sake of our country, because the way things are looking, it looks very dire.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned for the future, knowing this is the world that my children are going to be growing up in.
Yeah.
And I don't know who is going to be able to come and bridge that gap and be able to say, ultimately, whether you are blue or red, we're all human beings trying to survive in this world. And especially with this global pandemic, it's not even just America now. We're
Yeah.
talking about the entire human race and planet that has been impacted, that now we really have to learn how can we coexist with one another and be able to still continue to thrive, and build for our families and for the generations that are following behind us.
Yeah.
um, and that I think something I don't know if I read this. I don't know if where I heard it from, or did I just make it up? I can't say that. I can't tell you for certain, but this phrase keeps coming into my mind that one person can't change the world, but one person can make a difference in the world. And
Love it.
so it doesn't, you don't have to do something drastic to make a change. You don't have to um, go out and get 1 million people registered to vote. You don't have to be this huge motivational speaker. You don't have to think of it in terms of these large platforms. It can be your neighbor, your niece, your coworker, that if you can impact just one person in a positive way,
Yeah.
the ripple effects of affecting that person over time can be substantial.
Yeah.
And so don't shortchange yourself in thinking there's nothing I can do. What can I do? You can always do something. You're on this earth and you're alive because you can do something. And so I encourage everybody to look with that lens and that perspective and say, okay, maybe it can't be something major, but what's something small that I can do now? What are some skills? What are some experiences that I can use to impact one person in a positive way?
With that in mind, I want to share a story with you if I can.
Sure.
Um, I've had the opportunity to be with some of the wealthiest people in the world, not as they're in their audiences, but in their homes, to
Mm-hmm.
meet their children, to meet their parents, to sit at the dining room table, to talk with them, for them to counsel me, and for them to ask my counsel on occasion. And I've had the opportunity to have that same situation with some of the poorest of the poor. And the story I want to tell you about is one of the people that I met was who was the poorest of the poor. He was a homeless man by the name of Corey. And Corey, it took him a while to let me in. I sat down next to him and he had all sorts of defenses, all sorts of, like, what are you doing here? This is my corner. I'm not, and I ended up asking him how much he would make in the 20 minutes that I would be there with him. And he said $5. And so I said, I'm going to give you $50 and put it in your hat. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I just want to get to know you and not you and have you not, and you can make the $5 when maybe sitting here, more people will give money. Who knows? But it's all yours. After about 45 minutes, he started to open up. And I looked at him and I said, Corey, all these people pass you by all day, all night. If you could stop them and say one thing to them, what would you say? And he didn't even pause. He didn't miss a breath. He said, Danny, I would ask them to go up to someone they don't know and spend 10 minutes and just ask them how they're doing. And I said, Corey, why is that so valuable to you? Why is that so important? And he said, about 3 months ago, I was having a terrible day. Being homeless is not something that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And you go through your own insecurities and your own pains of being less than who you thought you were going to be. And then people come by and they punch you and they kick you and they urinate on you and they throw bags of defecation at you. They steal your money. They yell obscenities to you. And in this one day, all of that happened. And I thought, God, it's bad enough for me to be in my world, but now I'm pissing people off. Like, I have no right to be here. And I'm going to go around the corner to a dark street when it's nighttime, because on the street around the corner is nobody goes. And I'm going to take my life tonight. And not 2 minutes after he had that thought, a man came out of nowhere and put his hand on his shoulder and said, how are you doing, brother?
Oh,
And
wow.
Corey told me tears started to run down his face. And the man, instead of leaving, just sat down with him and held him. And he said, I'm here, talk to me. And he said, Danny, it only took about 10 minutes. But 10 minutes of just crying and talking to him and feeling his love for me
Mm-hmm.
made me realize that I couldn't take my life that day. And he said, I've never seen that man again. I wish I would have seen him because that man saved my life that day. Just by coming and sitting with me for 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've never seen Corey again, but I wish I could tell him that he's the reason why I'm doing 50 conversations with 50 strangers. He's the reason why I'm reaching out to people just to listen to people. He's the reason why I was going to go around the world and talk to people and sit on all these different places and be with people,
Mm-hmm.
because of the impact that he has. He doesn't know that his story's been told to thousands, if not millions of people now, and that
Wow.
thousands and millions of people have been given the opportunity to answer the challenge that I give them, which is the challenge that Corey gave me, which is, what would happen if you took 10 minutes out of the course of your life and just went up to someone you don't know and asked them how they are, with no desire to fix them, to change them, to help them, but just with the simple desire to love them and be there for them?
Mm-hmm.
What would that look like?
Wow.
If you had one thing you wanted to say, like Corey said, to the world that's listening right now, you have a 1 minute, what would you say?
I would say to Stop being so hard on yourself. Stop being so hard on yourself, and to learn to love who you are. Learn to find the things that are inside of you that are beautiful, that you can share with the world. And don't put roadblocks in front of you, because you can do it, because you're capable of more than that you think you are, and that you're here and you are created because there's something that you have to offer the world. And don't hold back from doing that anymore.
Ruth, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending this time with me. You are such a beautiful soul.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for taking the time to share with us your heart and your soul. For people who want to get in touch with you, maybe for girls who want to be mentored by you, is there a way for them to do that? Or do you have a website? Do you have social media links? And you'll send those to me and we'll put them
Yes,
in the
I
show
will
notes.
send you.
But what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So right now, the best way is through my email address, and
Perfect.
that's ruth.beltran@gmail.com.
Okay. So we will put that in the show notes so that people
Okay.
can do it. Again, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
For those of you who listen to the show, thank you for listening. Um, these are great shows, not because of what I bring to the show, but because of what people bring to the show. And so if you want to have a conversation with me or with somebody else, why not do what Corey suggested? Why not start this whole thing up yourself? You can do it from the privacy of your own home and invite people you don't know to just start having conversations with you. There have been stranger things than the goodness that comes when you talk to a stranger. Don't be a stranger anymore. Open up and share yourself with the world. Thank you again, Ruth. Anything in parting that you want to say before we just say goodbye?
Thank you. I would encourage others to do this as well. It was a lovely experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone. Share this with everybody. And until the next stranger comes along, which is going to happen in a couple minutes for me, I thank you so very, very much for being here. Okay. Don't be a stranger. Ciao.
Okay, thank you.